Welcome to Joy, Love, and Abundance, designed to lift up and explore the people, organizations, and experiences that create a more joyful, loving, and abundant world. Join hosts Rodney Eric Lopez, Patrice Tanaka, and Cyrus Webb as they share stories and insights that will inform and inspire you. Enjoy today's broadcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Joy, Love, and Abundance here on Mississippi's own WYAD 94.1 FM and WYADonline.com, as well as through our online affiliates, thanks to Amazon Music, as well as iHeartRadio. We're glad you all could be on with us. I'm Cyrus Webb, joined by my great friends, Patrice Tanaka and Rodney Eric Lopez today. Hello to the two of you. Glad to be back with you guys.
Hey. Good to see you again.
Back. Yeah, this is fun. Good to see
well, look, always a great time. And at the time that we're having this conversation, the world is watching what's taking place in England, guys, and that is the G7, the first global event with now U.S. President Joe Biden. Already news has been made where they have made pledges as part of the G7 to not only to share vaccine doses to help combat COVID-19 globally, but also to create a fairer economy. So they're looking at their governments to be able to do what they can to be able to help people around the world. And when I shared this with you guys today, Patrice, you had a great kind of twist on this that we could kind of even talk about. But, you know, as these countries are looking at ways that they can be able to make things better and to spread joy, love, and definitely abundance when it comes to the economy, it does bring up the question of what we can do as individuals to be able to do our part as well. Patrice, when you and I talked about this earlier today, the thing that came to my mind that I wanted to share is that, you know, one thing, the way I grew up, which I've shared with you guys before, is different than the way a lot of people grew up. But I was always told that one person could make a difference. Now, I meet people all the time today who do not believe that, and that I feel like that's unfortunate. But I grew up being told that what I do could impact people literally around the world. And honestly, I've seen that from myself. And so I have always looked for opportunities through the work that I do that I can be able to not only to entertain and inspire, but also to be able to give someone something tangible. In my organization, CMG, we've done that with different charities. A lot of it we don't talk about publicly, but we look for ways, especially here in my home state, where we have so many horrible problems like obesity, childhood pregnancy. I mean, there's so many things, health issues, and we've done our part to try to not only impact the lives of others, but also empower others. And so my thought was, you know, I think all of us out there, no matter where we are, there is no such thing as a little thing. And it kind of goes to what we talk about in this program a lot, and that is that all of us can do something. And we've all shared stories of individuals who've done that. So I definitely want our audience, as we're looking at what's taking place in England and looking at what those leaders are doing, which is great, not forgetting the role that all of us can be able to play in being able to make life a little bit easier in our own world, in our own spaces with those around us. Patrice, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that each of us can make a difference. In fact, this is kind of a recurring theme for our Joy, Love, and Abundance podcast, because I think that the three of us fully subscribe to the idea that it's only when we're in service of other people and our planet that we really live our most successful and fulfilling and joyful life. So I think that everyone, and Rodney said this, I think the last time we spoke, he quoted Martin Luther King, that everyone can do something, or everyone can be great because everyone can do something to help others, to serve others. And Desmond Tutu said pretty much the same thing. We can all do our little bit. And, you know, if everyone's doing their little bit, then there's an overwhelming amount of joy that could be shared in the world. So, yeah, I think we should. I love the idea of individuals doing their bit, organizations doing their bit, and countries, you know, doing their part as well to help create a more joyful planet. So
such a great thing. Rodney, what do you... I'm sorry, Patrice.
No, I said I'm with you on this.
But Rodney, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, when you brought up the idea of opening with the G7 summit, what I started thinking about is that these kind of international conversations really are about, they begin with this idea of diplomacy. And what is diplomacy? What does it mean to be diplomatic? I think at its core, diplomacy is about listening. Diplomacy is about communication. Diplomacy is about two countries or the leaders of two countries who may have opposing agendas, who may have they may have things that they intensely disagree about, but they find ways to find common ground and to talk to each other and to hopefully avoid violent means to solve a problem. And so when I think about that on the international stage, I think about how important it is to more personally and more locally listen to people. What does it mean to really deeply listen to someone whose point of view may be different from yours, maybe even intensely so? It's very hard because oftentimes issues can be polarizing, issues can be upsetting, and what is our part in turning down the temperature and actually listening to someone whose point of view may be different, may even offend us at times? I think that that's what we can do at the local level to create a more joyful world, a more loving world, and ultimately a more abundant world if we can put differences, not always put them aside, but at least set them down enough so that we can talk to each other and truly see each other. And so when I think about G7 and I think about these kind of international summits and conferences, what you hope is that what our world leaders are doing on some level is also happening at the local level and at the neighborhood level.
Yeah. Ronnie, you bring up a really interesting point, and it's something I think that gets lost sometimes, because I think one thing, and I'm curious to see you guys' thoughts about this too, that I think so many times people think, what can I do? And Ronnie, you just said something, and that is all of us can be a listening ear, right? All of us can be someone who, even if it's someone that we may not agree with on certain things, can be able to find that common ground. Kind of goes to that book I mentioned last week, I think. But, I mean, I think that is the thing, too. There's no such thing as too small a thing or too insignificant a thing. And I think so many times people get lost on that. And they think, well, what can I do? Or that person is so different than me. Or, how can I be of service to them? I don't even, live where they are. And I think, there are so many ways that we can be able to search out those opportunities.
And, Cyrus, I think, I think that, it's not to say that it's easy. And I think one of the things that we come back to in this podcast, in our conversations, is that there's a difference between pie in the sky, Pollyanna-ish thinking, and like the real work that leads to joy, love, and abundance. And that's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be a walk in the park. But it is possible, and I think with everybody taking small steps in their own way, we can have breakthrough results.
Yeah. Patrice, what are your thoughts?
No, I totally agree with Rodney. I love the idea of something being done at the person-to-person level, local level, and then extending, and expanding up to the global level, where we're all listening better, harder to one another to understand, so we can, collaborate better and avoid conflict, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I think all of us can do. I want to say for our audience, for those who are tuning in both on the radio side or online, joining us through the podcast or through one of the other platforms. You're listening to Joy, Love, and Abundance. You just heard there from Patrice Tanaka, Rodney Eric Lopez. I'm Cyrus Webb. And we're talking about kind of where the world finds itself right now, at least for the next week, as now U.S. President Joe Biden is in England with 6 other world leaders. They are there for the G7, being able to talk about ways that they can be able to work together to impact the world. They already have made, on their very first day at the time we're having this conversation, made pledges to be able to help the world when it comes to the fight against COVID-19 and giving millions of doses free to countries that are definitely in need, but also doing what they can to be able to help economically for those who have been ravaged, which I think so many people are as well. So I'm curious, and with us having this thought, what would you say to our audience, Rodney? I'll start with you on this, about how they can start looking. I think, as you said, it's not going to be easy, and it's not saying that even everything we do is going to work. I mean, that's not even being realistic for any of us, I think. But what would you say to our audience, Rodney, about at least trying to find that way that they can be of assistance?
Well, I think it's really just about being open to the opportunities that are around you. In our last conversation, we talked about service, and I think that, as Patrice mentioned earlier, the themes of our conversations are about what are the things within the circles of your influence that where you can have an impact. So you might be the parent of a child whose school just needs an extra hand, at the local PTA. It could be providing a meal to somebody who maybe is dealing with some food insecurity in your community. It could be a listening ear to someone who has lost a loved one, or who's going through financial difficulty, and just being there to be a listening ear to someone. There's lots of small ways. They don't have to be grand. They don't have to be big, but we can all find ways to extend ourselves just a little bit more in service of someone else.
Love that. Patrice, what are your thoughts? What would you say to our audience out there about how they can begin the process as these world leaders are trying to do on a global scale? What would you say to our audience about how they can be able to begin that process even in their own lives, in their own communities?
I think, as we said earlier, just be open and willing to hear and to listen to what someone else has to say. A lot of times we're so, ready to want the other person to stop talking so we can say what we have to say, and we're not really listening to one another. And I think that happens at every level, including at the highest level. So listening is really important, and it's an act of generosity and love to say that you care about what the other person is thinking. So it's a simple thing that I think, as you said, any and all of us can do. So if we all just did that would make a huge difference in the world.
Such a great point.
In our personal lives.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And again, I'll just go back to, again, the way I was raised. And again, I understand everyone was not raised the way I was, but I mean, that, my great-grandmother, who lived a very long life, died at 99. One of the things that she said that I always remember is it's just nice to be nice. And I never forgot that, because it was such a simple thing, but it's so true, and it's something not everybody does. But it's just nice to be nice. And it could be opening the door for someone. You see someone struggling, at a grocery store with some. I mean, I guess because I grew up with such empathy for people because of the way I was raised, I always look for those little things. It could be that little thing. Someone drops something and you stop them, and hand it to them and say, "Hey, you dropped this." Because those little things that a lot of times we may just take them for granted. That it's not, or I just thought about, sometimes we think, oh, well, somebody else will do that. Somebody else will tell them they dropped that, or someone else will help them with that. And I think to be able to think about how we personally can be of service, I think is so important, because we never know how those ripples that we talk about in this program can continue to spread. So I think it's a great conversation for us to have. Yes, it's great that world leaders are trying to do their part, but let's not forget, all of us, for our audience, that we can do our part as well. Now I want to turn to a part of the show that's always fun for me, because I love learning what you guys have been able to find or been involved in. And Rodney, you were sharing a great story that ties in perfectly with what we are talking about today. Why don't you share that with our audience?
I really enjoyed reading this blog this week. So many of the organizations and causes that we lift up in this program are mission-based, which means oftentimes they're being run by nonprofit organizations, right? Which is the sector of our economy that is responsible for the social good. And so one of the things, as people who are part of nonprofit organizations, either as people who staff them or who serve on boards or volunteer in other ways, one of the most important aspects of nonprofit work is philanthropy, this idea of raising money to meet the operational goals and the mission goals of the nonprofit, right? That's just sort of nonprofit 101. And so I read this incredible blog about an organization in the Pacific Northwest, the Oregon Food Bank, and they're trying to do something different in how they serve their community. They're working on a very radical notion that was born out of the COVID pandemic, and it was this idea of moving away from moving to decenter money as the main metric for how they measure success. And for anybody who's involved in nonprofit work or certainly in business, to decenter money is like sacrilegious, right? Because money makes the world go round. But what this organization is trying to do is something very experimental. And what they're doing is they're trying to come up with ways to measure love, to measure acts of love. Not sort of touchy-feely kind of love or romantic kind of love, but the actual, like, agape love, the love based in principle of your fellow man. And so they've been hard at work this year with a wonderful author by the name of Shireen Tang, who wrote a brown paper on how do you measure love. And they've actually begun the process of coming up with rubrics for how to assess and measure how love is being shown at the staff level with their donors and their funders and with the community at large. And they admit that this is hard. They admit that it's challenging. They admit that people are maybe not going to take this seriously because that people are going to say, well, at the end of the day, it's about how much money you raise. And I think what they're trying to say is if something raises money but isn't actually a loving act, they're prepared to say no. And I think that that's a radical breakthrough kind of approach. And so they're ready to launch some things this summer, and I'm really excited to see what comes of that.
I just love that because it reminds me of, the country of Bhutan is evaluating their success as a country, as an economy, according to their gross national happiness, right? And I just love that idea because the happiness and well-being of their people is what's, paramount. It's not how much, what their GDP is. It's really their gross national happiness. So I think they have the right idea, and so does the Oregon Food Bank. Thanks, Rodney. Yeah. Love it.
Sure, absolutely.
Really powerful story, and it really does show. I mean, we all have heard this. Well, two things come to mind, Rodney. Money's not everything, even though it has its role, but also not all money is good money. And I love the fact that if it's not coming from the right place, is it the right thing for you? I think it's such a great thing, I think, for all of us, again, to keep in mind. You have something that's coming up really quickly here, Patrice. Why don't you tell our audience about it?
Yeah, we have the New York Women's Forum has their annual fundraising lunch called the Elly Awards, ELLY, and Elly is named in honor of Eleanor Guggenheimer, who is the founder of the Women's Forum of New York, and the organization was founded in 1974, and it's an invitation-only organization for women in different fields of different sectors in New York City. So I'm a member of the Women's Forum New York, and I love what we do. And the Elly Awards actually raises money for our education fund. And this is a program that was created in 1987 as a way for us to give back. And this is all about women helping other women, right? So the education fund provides financial awards to women 35 and over who've demonstrated high potential, but whose education and life paths have been disrupted by extreme adversity. And I'm talking domestic violence, abuse, addiction, incarceration, and even the after effects of war. So what we're trying to do is give these women the opportunity to get their lives back on track, go back to school, earn their degree so they can get a good job, because we really believe that if you educate a woman, you impact generations. So, this award has helped hundreds of women since it was started in 1987. And so, as those of you who are interested in women helping women, attend our virtual Elly Awards. And the Women's Forum inspired other chapters around the world. So there are actually 74 Women's Forums in about 30-something countries. And we're all focused on women helping women. So anyway, yes, I'm very excited and proud to be part of the Women's Forum New York and the work that we do to help women and their families.
Yeah. Love that. And definitely necessary work. And it's funny because what caught my attention was something that is, normally I'm talking about books, which I'm still going to talk about a book, but the book is about somebody who has a very special thing, something I don't normally talk about, and that is they have a television program that's going to be based on them. I'm talking about the one and only Dr. Robert Ballard, who discovered Titanic in 1985. He's an explorer that's been a part of some amazing dives. This year he's celebrating a new book called Into the Deep about his life, where he talks about growing up with a learning disability, being told what he could not be, and then going on to find not only the Titanic but also the Nazi warship Bismarck as well. He's the individual who discovered it. So he talks about how going underwater, exploring the unknown, kind of helped him emotionally and also mentally. And his life is being chronicled in a special by National Geographic on June 14th called Bob Ballard, an Explorer's Life. And so they're going to do a deep dive, pun intended there, of his life. And I had an exclusive interview with him, and such a humble individual. I mean, I was so in awe of him. And the fact that this is an individual who at his age is, still active. He's still out there working. We're talking almost 80 years old, an individual who continues to be excited about life and the possibilities of life. But also, the reason I introduced him as Dr. Ballard, he's now gone to teaching. So not only is he an explorer who's gained all this notoriety, he now is educating the next generation. So such a great thing, such a powerful thing. But again, the special is June 14th on the Nat Geo channel, so you guys can check your local listings for that. Again, Bob Ballard, an explorer's life, again, based on the life of the individual who found the Bismarck and the one and only Titanic. So definitely wanted to make sure I shared that with our audience. And I want to say, too, to the two of you, I say it all the time, but I so enjoy, I feel, even though we have not seen each other in person in like 3 years, it seems, I think it's for like 3 years. When we come together every time for these shows, it's like we're just sitting around talking and just having a conversation, and the world just gets to listen in. So I always appreciate that. Any closing thoughts for you two of you guys?
No, let's keep doing this because we too love to come together and just share the good news and good things that people are doing all over the place.
Yeah. I so agree, and I hope that our audience out there will continue as well. As we talked about here, yes, it's great people are able to do things on a global scale, but may we all continue to do our part to be able to live life in a way that we can be able to cultivate more joy, love, and abundance for ourselves, but also impact the lives of others as well. Until next time, I'm Cyrus Webb. On behalf of Patrice Tanaka and Rodney Eric Lopez, we say thank you all so much for listening, both for our radio audience and those tuning in online, and we'll talk to you all soon. Take care.